You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday 13th of October 2014. UKIP sends shockwaves through the establishment with Carswells Clacton win. British tourist arrested in Morocco for homosexual acts. Hungary's Jobbik faces hard slog despite prospect of winning town halls. Coalition airstrikes against ISIS aid Bashar al-Assad, Syrian rebels claim. Islamic State seizes large areas of Syrian town despite air strikes. My hero today, Arkansas shooting range refuses to cater to Muslims. Hong Kong students undaunted by authorities' rejection of talks. Worrying indeed as Chinese captain killed in fishing clash with South Korea. Thought for the day, animals do count to nationalists. And finally, 2 for 1 day. UK news. UKIP sends shockwaves through the establishment with Carswells Clacton win. The UK Independence Party has gained its first elected MP, with Douglas Carswell taking the seat of Clacton by 12,404 votes. Mr Carswell, who defected from the Conservatives, knocked his old party, which enjoyed a 12,068 majority at the 2010 election, into second place. UKIP leader Nigel Farage said he had shaken up British politics. In the night's other by-election, Labour held on to Haywood and Middleton, but UKIP slashed its majority to 617. Mr Farage told BBC Breakfast UKIP could hold the balance of power after next year's general election. He said UKIP's second place in Haywood and Middleton was even more significant than its win in Clacton, saying the party was now the main opposition to Labour in northern cities. The whole of British politics has been shaken up, he added. Something big is happening here. People want change. They have had enough of career politicians in 3 parties. Stay true. Conservative Party Chairman Grant Shapps told BBC Breakfast the result in Clacton was a wake-up call. Labour Vice Chairman Michael Dewar said his party would continue to take on UKIP. In his acceptance speech, Mr Carswell, who gained 21,113 votes, 60% of the total, told UKIP supporters there was nothing that we cannot achieve. Addressing the people of his constituency, he said, "I resign from Parliament to face this election because I answer first, foremost and last to you. You are my boss, I will not let you down. To my new party I offer these thoughts: humility when we win, modesty when we are proved right. If we speak with passion, let it always be tempered by compassion." UKIP leader Nigel Farage said Mr Carswell was a brave and honourable man. He also addressed the party's prospects on a wider front, saying, "We must be a party for all Britain and all Britons, first and second generation as much as every other. Our strength must lie in our breadth. If we stay true to that, there is nothing we cannot achieve. Nothing we cannot achieve in Essex and East Anglia, in England and the whole country beyond." Another by-election is due to take place next month in Rochester and Stroud, Kent, following the resignation of Mark Reckless, who, like Mr Carswell, defected from the Conservatives to UKIP. World at 8. Be afraid, be very afraid, and the majority of these voters remain deluded. But wait, hey-ho, this is only Essex. British tourist arrested in Morocco for homosexual acts. A British tourist is claiming he spent 20 days in a Moroccan jail for reportedly practising homosexual acts in the North African country. Ray Cole, a 69-year-old gay man from Britain, was reportedly arrested in Morocco and sentenced to 4 months in prison for practising homosexual acts. The man was freed after only 20 days after his lawyers were able to successfully get their client released from prison. Cole, who was visiting a friend in the country, was arrested at a bus stop after police said they found what they believed to be homosexual images on his cell phone. Cole, who will soon turn 70, called the conditions in Moroccan jails horrendous. The British tourist reportedly found out he was going home from prison guards, who were supposed to transfer him to another prison, but instead had a different conversation with him. But then they said they were sending me home, Cole recalled, and they offered me a choice of spending the night in Marrakesh or getting the next flight home. Cole's son Adrian helped gain international support for his father's release by posting about the plight on Facebook. The prison does not segregate, so he's sharing with murderers, rapists, paedophiles, etc., the 41-year-old son wrote on Facebook. World at 8, when in Rome. Well, Marrakesh, one should respect the laws of the land. Arrested at a bus stop, he's lucky he only stayed for 20 days. European news. Hungary's Jobbik faces hard slog despite prospect of winning town halls. Hungary's Jobbik party is on track to take over dozens of city halls in a municipal election on Sunday, handing it to new powers that, critics say, will use to persecute ethnic minorities. Already the second biggest force in parliament, Jobbik is one of Europe's most influential nationalist right parties. Its rise has drawn international concern, notably when one of its lawmakers suggested that lists of Jews should be drawn up, a comment for which he later apologised, saying he had been misunderstood. But the experience in one town where Jobbik is already in power is that even the most hardline agenda ends up running aground in the swamp of budget shortfalls, petty squabbles and failed schemes that make up local politics in Hungary. Eric Fulop, the 32-year-old Jobbik activist who since 2010 has been mayor of Tiszavászvári, came to power on a promise to tackle gypsy crime, a rallying call for Jobbik supporters who resent Hungary's large and mainly poor Roma minority. But 2 years after he took office, the local militia he created to implement that promise, made up of 10 men, 2 cars and an electric scooter, had to abandon its patrols because he ran out of money to fund it. A think tank, Political Capital, forecast that in Sunday's election Jobbik has a good chance of winning in 41 municipalities out of the 3,200 in Hungary, where it came a close second in this year's parliamentary election. Those places include Miskolc, Hungary's second biggest city. World news. Coalition airstrikes against ISIS aid Bashar al-Assad, Syrian rebels claim. Syrian government forces are pursuing their war on rebels seeking the overthrow of President Bashar al-Assad and are barely affected by the US-led air campaign against the Islamic State ISIS, now focused on the embattled town of Kobani on the northern border with Turkey. Analysts and diplomats in Syria and abroad say government air raids, including deadly barrel bombings, have claimed scores of lives in the 2 weeks since the coalition airstrikes began. In some areas government attacks have intensified, as have rebel operations. But the Syrian president's ability to continue to attack his enemies without interference is fuelling anger amongst mainstream opposition supporters. Syrian warplanes used to shell us 2 or 3 times a week, but now they target us every day thanks to the coalition forces. Faris Samir from Ham in the northern Idlib region complained on Thursday. We are losing martyrs and many get injured, but no one pays any attention. Now the Syrian army is taking areas bombed by the coalition forces after the Islamic factions withdraw. I have to say that the coalition military campaign is in the interest of the Syrian regime and against the Syrian people. Oh, not so bright this lad, is he? Overall, however, the strategic picture has hardly changed. The only significant government advance has been north of Aleppo in the Homs area. In the Homs area, coalition strikes hit ISIS positions, but government forces were unable to take advantage. World at 8. About time these ISIS terrorists were done away with. They cause more trouble and death than they're worth. They are purely sectarian killers, without the so-called plight of the Syrian people in mind. Islamic State seizes large areas of Syrian town despite airstrikes. Islamic State fighters seized more than a third of the Syrian border town of Kobani, a monitoring group said on Thursday, as US-led airstrikes failed to halt their advance and Turkish forces looked on without intervening. With Washington ruling out ground operation in Syria, Turkey said it was unrealistic to expect it to mount a cross-border operation alone to relieve the mainly Kurdish town. The US military said Kurdish forces appeared to be holding out in the town, which lies within sight of Turkish territory, following new airstrikes in the area against a militant training camp and fighters. Washington said US forces launched 9 airstrikes on Thursday against Islamic State militants north and south of Kobani, striking some fighting units and destroying 4 buildings held by the group. US forces also conducted 2 airstrikes against Islamic State in Iraq. Retired US General John Allen, named by President Barack Obama to oversee the anti-Islamic State coalition, held constructive and detailed talks with Turkish leaders in Ankara on Thursday, the State Department said. Ankara resents suggestions from Washington that it is not pulling its weight and wants broader joint action that also targets the forces of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. We strongly reject allegations of Turkish responsibility for the ISIS advance, a senior Ankara government source said, using a former acronym for the militant group. World at 8. They have to be stopped getting to Turkey, preferably by the Turks, unless they want them over there. Throughout the history, the Turks have never made up their minds until too late. And, of course, they hate the Kurds. My hero today, Arkansas shooting range refuses to cater to Muslims. A Muslim civil rights group is asking the United States Department of Justice to investigate an Arkansas shooting range whose owner recently declared it a Muslim-free zone. In a letter to US Attorney General Eric Holder, Jennifer Wicks, a lawyer from the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, writes that the declaration is a violation of federal laws prohibiting racial and religious discrimination and will inevitably result in a hostile environment for ordinary Muslims in Arkansas. "This is not a coffee and donut shop," said Jan Morgan, owner of the Gun Cave indoor shooting range in Hot Springs, Arkansas, wrote in an online post last month. "This is a live fire indoor shooting range. Why would I want to rent or sell a gun and hand ammunition to someone who aligns himself with a religion that commands him to kill me?" Morgan, who says she has read and studied the Quran thoroughly, found 109 verses commanding hate, murder and terror against all human beings who refuse to submit or convert to Islam. "People who shoot at my range come from all religious backgrounds," she wrote. "I do not care about their religious beliefs until or unless those beliefs command them to commit violent crimes against innocent people, and I witness those crimes increasing as we all have lately." Morgan claims that when she received her licence to sell guns, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives informed her that if we feel any reason for concern about selling someone a firearm, even sense that something is not right about an individual, or if we are concerned about that person's mental state, even if they pass a background check, we do not have to sell that person a gun. Two different ATF agents stress that it is better to err on the side of caution. In other words, a federal agency has given gun shops discretion on firearms deals. "I understand that not all Muslims are terrorists," Morgan continued. "I also believe that there are as many Muslims who do not know what is in their Quran as there are Christians who do not know what is in their Bible. Since I have no way of discerning which Muslims will or will not kill in the name of their religion and the commands in their Quran, I choose to err on the side of caution for the safety of my patrons." In a letter to Holder, Wicks told Morgan appears to be misinterpreting the advice given to her and refusing service to all Muslims, which cannot be a correct interpretation of compliance with federal gun laws and the US Constitution. But according to Morgan, who says she has received death threats from Muslims in the past, the September 11, 2001 terror attacks, Boston Marathon bombing, Fort Hood massacre and a recent beheading at an Oklahoma food distribution centre justify her ban. "This is more than enough loss of life on my home soil at the hands of Muslims to substantiate my position that Muslims can and may follow the directives in their Quran and kill here at home," she wrote. CAIR sent copies of its letter to the Governor of Arkansas, US Justice Department Civil Rights Division, US Commission on Civil Rights, the US Attorney for the Western District of Arkansas and the ATF's Little Rock Field Office. Morgan responded on her Facebook page. "It's easy for CAIR to bully and threaten average American citizens like me who have a business to lose and a life to destroy. It's what they do. We are the easy targets. I've been a target of Islamist threats for 5 years, fully expecting at any time one of them to follow through with that threat. I may go down for speaking the truth about Islam. I may lose everything I have, which isn't much, but they can't take my integrity. This is a mountain I am willing to die on. A woman after my own heart. In the West, the bleat of too late rings true, and why would a Muslim want to go to a firing range anyway? They don't hunt for food. Just as they rarely fly planes anywhere than into Western buildings. Leave her alone, she's entitled to her views as well as the idiots and their so-called freedoms. These Muslims are not worshipping there, they are trying to train each other in a country which allows the bearing of arms for defence, not like here, where they'd have a field day against our spades and shovels." Hong Kong students undaunted by authorities' rejection of talks. Hong Kong student protesters said on Friday they were determined to maintain their campaign for full democracy, undaunted by the city's government's rejection of talks aimed at diffusing a standoff that has shaken communist China's capitalist hub. The government's decision to call off the talks with the students scheduled for Friday came as Democratic lawmakers demanded anti-graft officers investigate a $6.4 million business payout to the city's pro-Beijing leader while in office. The city's Chief Secretary, Carrie Lam, said the talks were off because of the students' unswerving demands for universal suffrage, which she said was not in accordance with the city's mini-constitution and what she described as their illegal occupation of parts of the city and calls for people to rally. Several hundred protesters were camped in the heart of the financial centre early on Friday, with many expecting crowds to swell later on Friday and over the weekend in response to the government's stand. For sure it will be jam-packed with people later in Admiralty after people get off work and students finish school, said Joshua Wong, a thin 17-year-old who heads the group Scholarism that represents secondary school pupils. Worrying indeed as Chinese captain killed in fishing clash with South Korea. The captain of a Chinese fishing vessel was killed Friday following a fight with South Korean Coast Guard officers who stopped his ship for suspected illegal fishing activities, officials said. A South Korean guardsman shot the man in the stomach with a handgun after he violently resisted inspections in the waters off South Korea's western coast, said Coast Guard official Kim Hae-yong. The 45-year-old Chinese national was airlifted to hospital and pronounced dead about 30 minutes later, according to officials at the Mokpo Hankook Hospital. The hospital did not immediately announce the exact cause of death. The deadly fight occurred as a dozen South Korean Coast Guard officers boarded the Chinese ship for searches in South Korea's exclusive economic zone, which extends 200 nautical miles, 370 kilometres from shore. When other Chinese fishing ships pulled nearby and sent their crew members aboard the ship being inspected, the Chinese captain began resisting more violently, which led to his shooting death, according to South Korean Coast Guard officer Cho Nam-yong. It wasn't immediately known whether there were other injuries. Chinese fishing boats have been going further afield to feed growing domestic demand for seafood as catches have decreased in waters close to China's shores. South Korea's coast seized about 220 Chinese ships last year for illegal fishing in the Yellow Sea. World at 8. Rather like the French and Spanish overfishing our waters. The Chinese need to find another source of food, don't they? Soylent Green, maybe? Thought for the day. Animals do count to nationalists. Now, in case you thought that being a nationalist just meant caring for your country and its people, you'd be wrong. Nationalism should and does include caring for animals and wildlife, and although it might be precluded, I include caring about overseas animals and the cruelty that goes on today, ably helped by the cheap clothing industries and the web. All modern gadgets used by the men or women in the streets and all available to children. Now, unless children are brought up with animals in a correct and kind fashion, not giving them human characters, but retaining their individual animal characteristics, then all would be well. But we have reached a stage in the Western world where virtually anything goes, and as long as it can be bought cheaply and worn once and then thrown away, no one actually cares where that bit of fur came from or how it was produced. And there is no bliss in ignorance, only to the really ignorant and selfish amongst us. And as a nationalist, I don't care for those people, or their country, or their progeny. I just couldn't care less. People may call us tree huggers, or townies, or just morons, but I believe we owe a debt to animal life, even if just because of the fact that so much money and misery has been made out of animals, whether that be bad farming, cruel husbandry, or just plain greed and ignorance. We owe animals big time. I'm sick and tired of men who have been born just around the corner from or near a field and class themselves as country guys, thinking that running over a badger is a good kill. They're just plain ignorant in the extreme. Unless you own cattle and unless they are kept in fields all the time, even at night, then badgers won't affect your milk herd. It is rather like the idiot who keeps chickens roaming around their garden and complains when a hungry and very naughty fox decides to have a bit of a game and demolishes the entire clan. Keep chickens in a proper chicken house and make sure it's locked every night. It's really simple, but like most common sense things, it appears to have vanished from the UK thinking gene pool. As to keeping exotic pets in council houses with no room or facilities, or caging large dogs which need exercise and training all day and night, I need not comment on these fools who, when they do let them out, provide a very young relative for their food. One less idiot is my thought. It surely must be well known even to the stupids amongst us that cheap anything made in China has usually got very nasty origins, and I mean very nasty, which might, if known, even put off the Primark shoppers or Costco or whatever is the in-shop for the masses nowadays. You know, if you can afford a real mink coat, it's not going to be all clean and bloodless, but it might be a whole lot better than the awful story of the Ugg boots. Well, not the real Uggs, but the imitations that crowd out sales and cheap shopping centres and supermarkets everywhere nowadays. Listen to a few stories of the raccoon dogs and think, before you buy fur-trimmed anoraks and boots, etc. One pair of Ugg boots tested by HSI revealed they contained dog raccoon fur, but were labelled Australian sheepskin. The tragic plight of raccoon dogs has been documented by animal rights groups, and activists have tried to ban the use of their fur. The animals are kept in extremely cruel conditions on farms in China. When they're ready to be harvested for their pelts, the dogs are severely beaten and then skinned alive. Raccoon dogs are indigenous to East Asia and related to wolves, coyotes and domestic dogs. Graphic video filmed by Swiss Animal Protection documented how the terrified animals are beaten with sticks and kicked in the head to keep them still while workers skin them and toss them into heaps to die. HSI has asked both the Australian government and Ugg Australia for comments. A spokesperson for Home Affairs, Minister Brendan O'Connor, told the animals rights group the government would not ban the import of raccoon dog fur. He explained Australia only bans the import of endangered animals and plants. The raccoon dogs routinely endure unspeakable suffering. There is no UK ban on their fur, so it's possible these phony boots could enter the high street. Genuine Australian Ugg boots can cost up to $320 in the UK, but fake versions of the iconic boot are flooding the market. They die a slow, agonising death, their bodies raw and bloody, he said. So no help there, as indeed there is very little help, as there is money at stake and not animal rights, because animals really have no rights in most countries in this world. Animals have suffered for science, medicine, cosmetics, clothing, perfume, working, farming, entertainment and many other things. Many items of which nowadays can have non-animal or alternative contents. But of course these are probably more expensive than bashing a wild animal over the head and skinning it alive, and obviously not so much fun as carrying this out. Snakes, crocodiles and all reptiles are at risk not from starving natives but greedy and stupid ones. Why someone cannot kill an animal before it skins it is totally beyond me. Why boil dogs alive for food when you can kill them beforehand? Why kick and torture animals going to the slaughterhouses of the world is also beyond me. It is a human thing which I could kill them for. All that suffering is so unnecessary, but must gratify the shareholders and the perpetrators in some weird, sick way. Working animals in the Middle East suffer terribly from beatings and abuse and heat, and yet their owners still haven't realised that if you feed and look after a working animal, you will get much more work out of it. In Asia, natives are encroaching with their bloody crops to feed their numerous sodding children because their birth rate is out of control, and yet fail to realise a hungry tiger, elephant or bear is going to try to find food where it used to. When will humans realise animals cannot just pop down to the local supermarket or migrate to another country, although I'm sure many would like to. If people fed the bears in the US, they would not get into houses to try and find food. It is simple common sense. The more humans take out of the earth, the less they put back. But amidst all this suffering and the many good-hearted groups and charities trying to help, there is one more disgusting, and I mean disgusting, crime I have to report. That of the crush videos, which use young and so-called sexy girls to torture and kill small animals, all for the web, and of course the money that is made out of it. Well, they have just been imprisoned for life, and I would have included a bit of cruelty just to help, perhaps cut off their ears before their sentence. True to type, it's a Filipino couple, and they have been prosecuted under a new law in the Philippines, the home of the dog beaters and eaters. A Philippine court last week found Vicente and Dorma Rydon guilty of child abuse, cruelty to animals, human trafficking and wildlife protection crimes. They were convicted under the relatively recent Philippine amendment to the animal welfare law that made crush videos illegal in that country. Evidence revealed they'd filmed young girls, one as young as 12, doing things to small helpless animals that were horrific beyond measure, including skinning a dog alive, cutting off rabbits' ears and setting them on fire as they flailed and screamed, burning a dog with a flat iron, stabbing a monkey and dogs in the eyes with the sharp end of a stiletto heel, crushing puppies under their feet until they vomited their own internal organs. So all of you that think bringing in Filipinos to look after our elderly are doing a good thing, just look at what their countrymen are capable of. Just as the Nepalese and their terrible festival that hacks to death 250 farm animals, corralled off and unable to flee, and we are taking these people in by the lorry load, and their cultural habits and attitudes towards animals at the same time. Do we really need more nasty people in this country? I think not. We have our own retards with their buying habits, and African immigrants bringing in endangered animals, dead or alive, nearly as well as Ebola, but I'll save that for another day. Animals cannot get or spread Ebola, which is something the Spanish really should have known before they killed an Ebola patient's dog. But coming from a country which tortures bulls and throws goats off towers, what can one expect? The world is really sick and out of balance regarding animal, reptile, bird and fish welfare, and that goes for domestic, working or wild. There seems to be no stopping the sodding Chinese, and I wish they'd start on their own kind and skin them and boil them alive to eat. Now that would solve their population problem, wouldn't it? And I would help them, as would many if they were totally honest. It's not tree hugging, it's practical in a sense. Because once the animals go, we humans, or what passes for humans, will not be far behind. On the other hand, of course, there are two other points to consider. If other carbon-based life forms could speak in human tongue, they would be top of the food chain and not us. And if you feed a dog, it will lick your hand. If you help a fellow human, they will quite often bite you or stab you in the back. Now, who is the nicer life form? I know, do you? And finally, 2 for 1 day Friday, a lady dentist. A bloke goes to a female dentist to have a tooth extracted. She pulled out a large syringe to give an anaesthetic shot. No way, no needles, I hate needles, the bloke said. So she started to hook up the nitrous oxide tank, and he said, I can't do the gas thing, just the thought of having a mask on my face suffocates me. The dentist then asked the patient if he had any objections to taking a pill. No, he says, I'm fine with pills. The dentist gave him 2 little blue pills and he swallowed them. What are those, he asked. Viagra, she replied. Well, I'll be damned, said the dentist. I didn't know Viagra worked as a painkiller. It doesn't, said the dentist, but it'll give you something to hold on to when I pull your tooth out. And a young lady walks into a supermarket, and on her way around the aisles she sees the bloke who had his wicked way with her the previous evening after they met in a pub. He was stacking washing powder boxes onto the shelves. You lying toad, she yells. Last night you told me you were a stunt pilot. No, he says, I told you I was a member of the aerial display team. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and we will touch base again on Friday. Keep your comments coming in. They're going to be put on Radio Britain online, and everybody will be able to see what everybody has written. Thank you.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number 1 in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday 13th of October 2014. UKIP sends shockwaves through the establishment with Carswells Clacton win. British tourist arrested in Morocco for homosexual acts. Hungary's Jobbik faces hard slog despite prospect of winning town halls. Coalition airstrikes against ISIS aid Bashar al-Assad, Syrian rebels claim. Islamic State seizes large areas of Syrian town despite air strikes. My hero today, Arkansas shooting range refuses to be more significant than its win in Clacton, saying the party was now the main opposition to Labour in northern cities. The whole of British politics has been shaken up, he added. Something big is happening here. People want change. They have had enough of career politicians in 3 parties. Stay true. Conservative Party Chairman Grant Shapps told BBC Breakfast the result in Clacton was a wake-up call. Labour Vice Chairman Michael Dewar said his party would continue to take on UKIP. In his acceptance speech, Mr Carswell, who gained 21,113 votes, 60% of the total, told UKIP supporters there was nothing that we cannot achieve. Addressing the people of his constituency, he said, I resign from Parliament to face this election because I answer first, foremost and last to you. You are my boss, I will not let you down. To my new party I offer these thoughts: humility when we win, modesty when we are proved right. If we speak with passion, let it always be tempered by compassion. UKIP leader navigator to Muslims. Hong Kong students undaunted by authorities' rejection of talks. Worrying indeed as Chinese captain killed in fishing clash with South Korea. Thought for the day, animals do count to nationalists. And finally, 2 for 1 day. UK News. UKIP sends shockwaves through the establishment with Carswells Clacton win. The UK Independence Party has gained its first elected MP, with Douglas Carswell taking the seat of Clacton by 12,404 votes. Mr Carswell, who defected from the Conservatives, knocked his old party, which enjoyed a 12,068 majority at the 2010 election, into second place. UKIP leader Nigel Farage said he had shaken up British politics. In the night's other by-election, Labour held on to Haywood and Middleton, but UKIP slashed its majority to 617. Mr Farage told BBC Breakfast UKIP could hold the balance of power after next year's general election. He said UKIP's second place in Haywood and Middleton was even more reportedly arrested in Morocco and sentenced to 4 months in prison for practising homosexual acts. The man was freed after only 20 days after his lawyers were able to successfully get their client released from prison. Cole, who was visiting a friend in the country, was arrested at a bus stop after police said they found what they believed to be homosexual images on his cell phone. Cole, who will soon turn 70, called the conditions in Moroccan jails horrendous. The British tourist reportedly found out he was going home from prison guards, who were supposed to transfer him to another prison, but instead had a different conversation with him. But then they said they were sending me home, Cole recalled, and they offered me a choice of spending the night in Marrakesh or getting the next flight home. Cole's son Adrian helped gain international support for his father's release by posting about the plight on Facebook. The prison does not segregate, so he's sharing with murderers, rapists, paedophiles, etc., the 41-year-old son wrote on Facebook. Nigel Farage said Mr Carswell was a brave and honourable man. He also addressed the party's prospects on a wider front, saying, "We must be a party for all Britain and all Britons, first and second generation as much as every other. Our strength must lie in our breadth. If we stay true to that, there is nothing we cannot achieve. Nothing we cannot achieve in Essex and East Anglia, in England and the whole country beyond." Another by-election is due to take place next month in Rochester and Strood, Kent, following the resignation of Mark Reckless, who, like Mr Carswell, defected from the Conservatives to UKIP. World at 8. Be afraid, be very afraid, and the majority of these voters remain deluded. But wait, hey-ho, this is only Essex. British tourist arrested in Morocco for homosexual acts. A British tourist is claiming he spent 20 days in a Moroccan jail for reportedly practising homosexual acts in the North African country. Ray Cole, a 69-year-old gay man from Britain, was